the decision to bring charges against President Trump. Our investigation developed proof beyond a reasonable doubt that President Trump engaged in criminal activity. If asked whether to prosecute a former president based on the same facts today, I would do so regardless of whether that president was a Democrat or a Republican. No one should be above the law in this country, and the law required that he be held to account, so that is what I did.
Jack Smith has broken his silence and dropped a bombshell warning aimed squarely at Donald Trump's future. In a detailed and pointed public statement released just hours ago, the special counsel laid out a chilling message about what lies ahead if Trump and his allies continue down their current path of challenging legal boundaries and attempting to shield themselves from accountability. This is not some routine legal notice. This is Smith sounding the alarm in the clearest terms yet, signaling that the investigations into Trump's handling of classified documents, obstruction efforts, and related matters are far from over, and that any further moves to interfere could trigger severe consequences. The statement hits like a freight train. Smith writes that despite the political shifts in Washington, the core evidence gathered over years remains intact and continues to point towards serious violations. He specifically highlights new developments that have strengthened the case, including additional witness accounts and forensic details that underscore Trump's personal knowledge and intent. The rule of law does not expire with an election or bend to the convenience of any individual, Smith declares in one of the most direct passages, making it crystal clear that the former president's return to power does not grant him immunity from past actions. This warning comes at a pivotal moment. Trump is settling into his second term, placing loyalists in key law enforcement positions, and floating ideas about broad pardons and shutting down lingering probes. Smith is firing back, warning that such steps would not only fail to end the legal exposure
and disloyal. Since that first broadcast, we have endeavored to chronicle Donald Trump's vicious war against the rule of law in our country. And no one understands what Trump's attacks against the rule of law look like better than that man, former special counsel Jack Smith. So much of what we know about Donald Trump's efforts to undo his defeat in the 2020 presidential election against Joe Biden and his mishandling of some of the country's most sensitive national security secrets is because of the tireless work of Jack Smith and his team. More than anyone else in the country, he represented a threat to Donald Trump because he followed the facts and they led him deep inside Donald Trump's government and political coalition. The facts revealed crimes, and those crimes were serious enough to represent a very real risk of conviction at trial for Donald Trump. That's the standard to indict somebody. And because of that fact, Donald Trump has called Jack Smith horrible things: a quote thug, a scoundrel, a criminal, and a sick man. And we could actually go on, but we don't want to waste our time that way. Trump has threatened to prosecute him. And Jack Smith has made clear that he was just doing his job. He would do it all over again if given the chance. In his letter to Attorney General Merrick Garland, delivering his final report, he writes this, quote, "The claim from Mr. Trump that my decisions as a prosecutor were influenced or directed by the Biden administration or other political actors is, in a word, laughable. While we were not able to bring the cases we charged to trial, I believe the fact that our team stood up for the rule of law matters. I believe the example our team set for others to fight for justice without regard for the personal costs matters. The facts, as we uncovered them in our investigation and as we set forth in my report, matter." That's where we start the hour. Joining us for his first interview, former special counsel Jack Smith. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me.
I asked you this when you walked in, and I'll ask you, how weird is it to view it as part of your service to tell the story of the investigations you led?
Yeah, well, I was a career prosecutor. I worked in the Justice Department and other prosecutors' offices for near on 30 years. And I don't know if your viewers know this, but I worked in Republican and Democratic administrations over and over. I was the acting U.S. attorney in the first Trump administration in Nashville, Tennessee. And that administration appointed me to a position running a war crimes tribunal for the State Department. So I have investigated cases focusing on the facts and the law throughout my career. We did this case the same way, under the same standards. And, the thing that's, I think, important for your viewers to know is those standards are not meant to change from one administration to the next. And in my experience, until now, they haven't. And so, I think we are facing an attack on the rule of law that is different in kind and scope to anything I've seen in my lifetime. And one of the reasons I wanted to be with you here today, in advance of the 4th of July, celebrating the birth of a country that we all love, is to celebrate the public servants who do this work, the people I spent my career working shoulder to shoulder with. I loved being a prosecutor, and part of it was I loved being around these sort of people. And it angers me to see them victimized, to see them demonized for doing their jobs. I think it's really important that we stand up for them and let them know that there are a lot of people out there who back them and who are with them. And that's not just the people who've been targeted and fired for no reason for doing their jobs,
but could create entirely new criminal liabilities for everyone involved. He points to the classified documents case as particularly damning, reminding everyone that the evidence includes Trump's own recorded words, where he discusses sensitive materials he knew remained classified, admits he no longer had the power to declassify them, and describes showing them to others anyway. Legal experts reviewing the statement tonight say it reads like a roadmap for potential future prosecutions. Smith details how efforts to obstruct justice allegedly continued long after initial demands for the return of documents. Boxes were moved, staff were pressured, lawyers were given incomplete information, and surveillance materials were delayed. Each of these steps, Smith notes, was taken with full awareness of the legal risks. The recording played in court earlier, where jurors reportedly gasped at Trump's casual discussion of secret information, remains a cornerstone that, Smith says, cannot be wished away. Smith expands on the national security implications. He describes how the mishandling exposed sensitive details about military operations, intelligence sources, and foreign threats. He warns that such carelessness or deliberate retention does not just violate statutes, but endangers American lives and alliances. Those who held the highest office have the highest duty to protect classified information, not treat it as personal property to impress guests or settle scores, the statement reads. This is Smith at his most forceful. He has largely avoided public commentary until now, letting the court filings speak for themselves. Breaking that silence today suggests he sees an urgent need to push back against the narrative that the cases are dead. With allies like Kash Patel in influential roles, concerns about retaliation against investigators have grown. Smith addresses this head-on, stating that any attempts to purge personnel involved in the probes or pressure witnesses will be viewed as obstruction and pursued aggressively. The statement also touches on the January 6th investigations still simmering in the background. While some charges have faced hurdles, Smith notes that new information continues to emerge about coordination and efforts to subvert the electoral process. He warns Trump's inner circle that witness tampering or document destruction will not be tolerated and could lead to fresh indictments that reach higher up the chain. For Trump's future, the warning is stark. Smith essentially says that the legal overhang will shadow the entire second term. Attempts to use presidential power to self-pardon or protect co-conspirators could trigger constitutional crises and additional legal challenges. Courts have already signaled skepticism about sweeping claims of immunity. Smith cites recent rulings that rejected broad executive protections in similar contexts, reinforcing that no one is above the law. This lands particularly hard because of the personal nature of the evidence. It is not just prosecutors making allegations. It is Trump's own voice on tape, his own staff testifying under oath, his own actions documented in photos and logs. Smith hammers.
It's also the people still in the Justice Department today. There are a lot of good career prosecutors who right now are working under incredibly difficult circumstances, and they're still trying to do the right thing. And these are not self-promoters. These are not people who are going to go out and crow about their achievements. We need to hold them up and celebrate them because they're part of what makes this country great.
Some of the agents, FBI agents that worked for you have been savaged by Donald Trump and Kash Patel. At least one agent talked about being fired while he was taking care of his very, very sick wife. What did you expect to happen to these agents, and do you regret putting any of them in that position?
I feel terrible about what has happened to them. If there's one thing I've spent my time on since leaving my work as special counsel, is doing what I can to help and support them. The individual you're talking about, he was nursing his wife who was dying of cancer, and they fired him shortly after she died. I went to the funeral. That funeral was filled with heroes, public servants on both families, And I just can't believe that if people knew the character of these people I worked with, that they could ever stand for the demonizing that's happened to them. It's just beyond anything I can understand.
And my sense from my limited exposure to people in DOJ and the FBI from my time in government is they don't really want to go do other things. They want this to be their life's work, protecting the country's national security. Will you talk a little bit about the price people have paid who have been purged for political purposes?
Yeah, I mean, you know, a lot of the agents and prosecutors I've worked with, and to be clear, not just in the special counsel's office, but throughout my career in a bunch of different positions I've had in the Justice Department, this is the culmination of what they wanted to do. It's why they went to law school, and it's their way of serving our country. And we've seen so many times in these retribution cases where prosecutors wouldn't be a part of it. You know, prosecutors in Minnesota who are like, I'm not going to investigate the family member of a shooting victim. I'm not doing that. Prosecutors who wouldn't go through with retribution prosecutions. And those people give up a lot. This is their whole career. A lot of them, you know, this isn't a lucrative sort of profession for a lawyer in terms of what you could do in private practice. They have to support their families. And one thing I have hope about is I think the traditions in the department, the people it draws, are so strong that we're going to have to rehabilitate the department for sure. But there's a lot of people still there, still in place, wanting to do the right thing, wanting to follow the facts and the law, not be a part of any retribution campaign. And I think for me, one of the things I see as I go around and talk to folks, and I try to travel around the country a lot and see different people and talk to different perspectives about this, is that those people, it really matters to them if they know they're being supported. Part of this campaign is to make people feel like isolated and feel like they don't have people backing them up. And so I just think it's really important. I want to express my support. I think everybody else should express their support. It's something with meaning, and it's also something that matters.
I mean, Chris Wray was the director of the FBI when the FBI agents that you're talking about went to work for you. He said nothing. Why?
You know, I can't really comment on other people's choices. I would say...
Would it help?
Well, I think my perspective on this is that in the moment we're in, which is a pretty dire moment, right? What we're facing.
There's this point repeatedly, noting that juries and the public respond strongly to direct evidence that contradicts public denials. The political fallout is already building. Democrats are hailing the statement as a necessary defense of democracy. They plan to use it to rally support for protecting special counsel independence and shielding career officials from political interference. Republicans are dismissing it as sour grapes from a failed prosecutor, but privately, some acknowledge the statement complicates efforts to move past the scandals. Smith spends significant time addressing the broader institutional risks. He warns that if these cases are derailed through raw power rather than legal merits, it sets a dangerous precedent. Future presidents could face similar shields or, conversely, weaponized investigations. The cycle would erode trust in the justice system until it collapses under partisan warfare. He draws on historical examples without naming them directly, referencing periods where executive overreach was checked by independent investigations. The message is clear. The system worked then and must work now. Smith positions himself as a defender of that system, not a partisan actor. Expanding on the classified documents saga, Smith revisits the timeline in detail. From the initial discovery of boxes at Mar-a-Lago to the grand jury subpoena, the search warrant, and the recovery of dozens of classified items. He describes how Trump personally reviewed some materials and directed their handling. He notes the bathroom storage, the ballroom events where documents were shown, and the efforts to block investigators. The recording is revisited at length. Smith quotes key excerpts where Trump discusses secret information, acknowledges the classification, and notes the loss of declassification power. That moment, when played in proceedings, reportedly left the room in stunned silence. Smith says it proves knowledge and intent beyond a reasonable doubt, making defenses of ignorance or automatic declassification untenable. New details in the statement include accounts from additional witnesses who have cooperated recently. Some describe frantic efforts to reorganize storage after subpoenas. Others recount conversations where Trump expressed defiance toward legal requests. These fresh accounts, Smith indicates, have only strengthened the case as time has passed. For Trump's future, this means constant legal vulnerability. Appeals will drag on. Congressional oversight could intensify. Public attention will remain fixed on every new revelation. Smith warns that any retaliatory actions against those who cooperated could lead to witness tampering charges that ensnare.
That we should be uplifting the people who are doing the right thing. And I'll give you an example from my life. I resigned a special counsel. I know I need to get a lawyer because the president has said he wants to jail me for doing my job. And so I retain lawyers, Covington and Burling. As soon as that becomes public, the president and the Justice Department target that law firm. And they do it because they don't want me to have counsel. They don't want to have anyone represent me. And what happened next was the very day that happened, Nicole, the lawyers at the firm called me up and said, Jack, don't worry about it. We're there for you. They did not blink for a second. And as you know, that's very different than how some other law firms behaved. I think we should focus on things like that in separating a firm like Covington and Burling from other ones that didn't show courage to come forward.
Well, right. The ones that fought also have batted 1,000 in the courts. I think Judge Beryl Howell described those executive orders as giving her chills, chilling her to the bone. But some of the giant law firms that were so central in our politics in the first Trump term didn't just capitulate to Trump. They're now working for Trump's Justice Department, firms like Paul Weiss and others. What do you make of the damage they're doing to our democracy at a moment you describe as dire?
Yeah, well, I think one of the problems, there's several layers, right? One of the problems right today, besides the retribution prosecutions, is that the Justice Department can't do its job, right? If you go to court—
Explain that.
Well, if you go to court and the judges don't trust you, you can't do the basic things that you need to do to represent the American people in court. And we have seen judges across the country say they can't trust prosecutors anymore. And that has such a cascading effect on any sort of case. I can't count how many opinions, but one opinion like that in my career would have been seismic. People would not know what to do if a court said, trust that's been built over generations has been lost in days, right? And that's happening every day. And so regardless of what you think politically, they're just not effective at doing their job anymore. They've jettisoned expertise, right? And so we have a situation where we've got rid of people who know how to protect our national security, and we think that that's somehow not going to have an effect on our national security. An example I can give you, Brian Driscoll. I don't know if you know who he is. Mm-hmm. He was the—
He made a great video at the beginning to kind of rally the troops, it seemed, from the outside.
Yeah, he's a folk hero in the FBI. If you were casting for a hero, right, that's what they look
Central
like,
casting,
right?
Yes.
Right? And just for your viewers, this is a guy, career agent, mob investigator, SWAT team, hostage rescue, served overseas, Medal of Valor, bravery medals, all these things, and an expert in counterintelligence. They got rid of him because he stood up for agents who were being targeted improperly. You cannot tell me our country is as safe as it was when people like that are being let go and fired for no reason.
Well, the purge seems to have multiple tentacles. It's for FBI agents and prosecutors who worked on your two cases. It's also for people who aren't doing the personal political bidding of the individuals there. I think Mr. Bove started that in the short time he was there. Kash Patel, based on news accounts, seems to be carrying that out for deeply personal conduct. What does that mean for the people who were there because it was their life's dream to do that work to protect the country? What are they doing instead?
Yeah, it's very tough because, the people we're talking about, these people I spent my career with, that I've so enjoyed their company and I have both respect and affection for.
More senior figures. The statement also addresses potential pardon strategies. While a president can pardon federal crimes, Smith notes limits on self-dealing and the possibility that state-level matters or new federal offenses arising from cover-up attempts remain unprotected. He signals readiness to challenge any abuses of pardon power in court. This creates a nightmare scenario for the administration. Governing while under this cloud risks policy paralysis and constant scandal. Midterm prospects for Republicans could suffer if voters grow weary of the drama. Smith seems aware of this dynamic and is leveraging it by keeping the focus on facts and evidence rather than politics. National security experts have reacted strongly. Former intelligence officials say Smith's warning highlights real risks to sources and methods. Compromised information from that period could still be exploited by adversaries. The failure to treat these materials with proper care, Smith argues, was not a victimless act. Smith calls on Congress to act. He urges lawmakers to pass protections for special counsels and whistleblowers. He asks for oversight hearings that examine any attempts at interference. This puts Republicans in a difficult position, forcing them to either defend the rule of law or appear to support, shielding a president from accountability. The statement is explosive in its detail. Smith opens by reaffirming the strength of the evidence collected over years of investigation. He points to the Mar-a-Lago recovery of dozens of classified documents, many marked at the highest levels. He highlights Trump's own recorded conversation where he discusses secret information, acknowledges he could have declassified it while in office but did not, and admits he no longer holds that authority. That recording, Smith notes, remains one of the most powerful pieces of direct evidence, capturing Trump's knowledge and intent in his own words. The special counsel warns that this evidence cannot be erased by political power or claims of immunity. Smith goes further, revealing that new witness testimony and forensic details have strengthened the case even after the election. Aides have come forward describing direct instructions from Trump regarding the handling of boxes, delays in returning materials, and efforts to limit what investigators could access. He describes frantic movements of documents between locations, misleading statements to lawyers, and attempts to conceal surveillance footage.
Said, quote, "The basis for those charges rests entirely with President Trump and his actions." Republicans have baselessly claimed Smith was part of a Biden administration conspiracy to target Trump. Now, Trump himself recently called Smith deranged and a criminal. My panel is back, and we are joined now by Caitlin Polantz. What do we know so far about this testimony?
Well, Dana, the biggest headline right now is that he's talking. He's not taking the fifth. He's not declining to answer questions. We know that Smith is responding to questions of the committee. That's notable not just because it's notable to have this former special counsel testifying for the very first time in a setting like this. It's also notable because the knives are out for him, and there's a lot of possibilities where he could walk into a situation where somebody wants to see him criminally prosecuted, whether that's a court, the Justice Department itself, Trump already out there saying he wants to see him behind bars, or the Republicans on Capitol Hill. They actually had a deputy previously from Smith's investigation. The man who led the January 6th investigation has already gotten a criminal referral for obstructing Congress, for declining to answer some questions in this investigation. And so the perils that Smith has in how he navigates this interview, he can't decline to answer because he could get a referral like Thomas Windham, another prosecutor on his team, for obstruction of Congress. But then if he gives too much information, there's always the possibility that Congress could accuse him of making a false statement if he says something different than what's in the record or what someone else on his team is testifying to. And then there are court orders and Justice Department restrictions around information from the classified documents case, evidence from the classified documents case against Trump, the volume 2 of the report under seal, and then grand jury secrecy. So much at stake here that even get you to the substance of this, where Republicans, we know, are very unhappy with his oversight of an investigation that included using or looked at toll records of phones, so the logs of calls that had been made in the past of members of Congress. Although we do know from what we've heard so far about what Smith is saying that he believes that he wasn't choosing the members of Congress that they got the phone records on. That was because Donald Trump himself was trying to call members of Congress on January 6th, 2021 in the middle of that violence.
Isaac?
Yeah, look, first of all, the idea that this was a Biden conspiracy, it runs up to me against all the people that I knew in the Biden White House who were being driven crazy by how Jack Smith was not doing what they would have hoped he would have been doing and being more forceful and fast in proceeding with this. Now, that doesn't mean that there wasn't one, but it would certainly be news to a lot of the people in the Biden West Wing that they were part of a conspiracy. The other thing that Jack Smith has here is that, look, January 6th happened. We all saw those images, and we also all saw those images of all the documents that were stored in the bathroom at Mar-a-Lago when that raid happened. Again, that doesn't mean that the criminal procedure was done necessarily in exactly the right way, but there was a basis for these investigations, and that seems to be, the idea that they were even looked at all seems to be offensive to some of the people involved.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what Jim Jordan said. Listen to, he's running this investigation. Listen to what he said this morning.
This was political. This was about going after the Republican Party. And most importantly, it was about going after our candidate for president, President Trump.
And that's really what it comes down to. Republicans.
Each of these actions, according to Smith, demonstrates a pattern of willful obstruction that goes beyond simple negligence. This warning for Trump's future is stark. Smith explicitly states that attempts to use the presidency to shut down investigations, fire key personnel, or issue protective pardons could themselves constitute new crimes. He cautions that self-dealing through pardons or directing the DOJ to drop cases would trigger additional legal challenges and potentially new indictments. The message is unmistakable. Trump cannot simply declare the cases closed. The legal machinery continues, and interference will be met with consequences. Legal analysts are calling this one of Smith's strongest public interventions yet. By breaking silence now, he is countering the narrative that his role ended with he is positioning the investigations as ongoing and essential to preserving the rule of law. Sources familiar with the special counsel's thinking say the statement was timed to deter immediate moves by the new administration to install loyalists and dismantle remaining probes. Smith dedicates significant portions to the national security damage. He explains how the mishandling of documents containing details on military plans, intelligence sources, and foreign threats created real risks. Adversaries could have accessed sensitive information left in unsecured locations, like ballrooms and bathrooms at Mar-a-Lago. Smith warns that such lapses do not just violate the law, but betray the public trust and endanger American personnel abroad. He calls it a shocking dereliction from someone who held the highest office. The statement revisits the courtroom drama in detail. When that key recording was played, the reaction was visceral. Jurors reportedly gasped as Trump's voice filled the room, discussing materials he knew were still classified. Defense attorneys scrambled. The moment shattered claims of automatic declassification or innocent mistake. Smith emphasizes that this direct evidence from Trump himself makes the case nearly unassailable on the question of intent. For Trump's future, this creates a permanent shadow. Every major decision, every international negotiation, every domestic policy push will occur under the cloud of potential legal action. Appeals will drag through courts. Congressional Democrats will demand updates and hearings. Public attention will remain fixated on every new leak or filing. Smith is warning that the second term cannot be a clean slate. The past actions have consequences that will continue to unfold. Smith also addresses the politicization of law enforcement. He notes rising concerns about purges at the FBI and DOJ targeting agents who worked on Trump-related cases. He warns that such retaliation would violate federal protections and could lead to contempt charges or new obstruction cases.
Are repeating over and over, and they did at the behest of Donald Trump back when he was actually being prosecuted for these things, which we did see with our own eyes January 6th. And the question of his culpability, that's clearly what the whole process is for, the judicial process is for. So it's a question of whether you just leave it alone or whether you say, you know what, Republicans are going to call this political and there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah, listen, I mean, Donald Trump is very angry, right? And he believes there was a big conspiracy, Biden at the head of it, to get him. And so now there is a, retribution is happening. And you've seen that already with Jim Comey. You've seen that with Tish James. It's not necessarily going anywhere. We'll see what happens with Jack Smith. But this is essentially what he ran on. I will be your retribution. Mm-hmm. He talked to his MAGA supporters, and he feels like he has to deliver. And he also just feels aggrieved. And that is part of the glue that keeps MAGA together. And it also just fuels him. So much of his time is spent on this, on Truth Social, going after these people who he thinks went after him.
And it's also whether he's going to be, he said, I will be your retribution, but he's actually, for most of the year, spent time being his own retribution.
His own retribution. Exactly right. And that's in various ways during those 11 interviews that Susie Wiles did with Vanity Fair. She said that she doesn't think it's a retribution tour at one point, but she also admitted in a couple of instances that basically it is.
Basically it is, certainly for Letitia James, but also
score settling.
For sure, score settling, and indicated during one of the interviews that transpired throughout the year that she was going to give him like 50 days, I believe it said.
Yeah, I think it was 90 days.
Oh, was it 90? Okay, for retribution. Well, that has long expired. But look, but one of the, I guess, the bigger picture challenges of this is if the midterm elections are still about this, that doesn't necessarily solve what we were talking about at the beginning of the program, the biggest challenge facing the White House, affordability, the economy. This, voters in the middle aren't as interested in this as MAGA supporters who always have the president's back. So it's a bit of, I'm sure the president loves to see Jack Smith walking through the hallways, but it doesn't solve his bigger political problem.
I want to welcome former state and federal prosecutor David Weinstein, who joins us from Miami. David, good to have you with us. So from your perspective as a former federal prosecutor, what is the significance of Jack Smith testifying privately before the House Judiciary Committee?
Well, as Andy pointed out, it's more of a structured setting. They'll be asking him questions, but in the way that any deposition would take place. They'll be led by one individual. There won't be time constraints. We won't have to hear about, I need a couple of minutes back based on that answer or things like that. This is very much more of a structured type of hearing. However, the answers are going to still be the same. He's going to be able to talk about what he did, how he did it, and to the extent he has any information about what the results were, he's going to be limited by what he cannot say about matters that occurred before a grand jury that are covered by the grand jury secrecy rules, unless a judge orders him to be allowed to disclose that. And as Andy pointed out, the second part of his report is still tied up in court down here in South Florida. He can't talk about that either. So they may be asking a lot of questions, but I'm not sure they're going to get a lot of answers.
Yeah, interesting. And I do want to understand, how common is it for a former special counsel to be...
Career officials, he says, must be allowed to do their jobs without fear of political revenge. This shocking warning extends to January 6 matters as well. Although some avenues have faced setbacks, Smith reveals that threads involving witness coordination and document preservation remain active. He cautions that any pressure on former aides or officials to change testimony or destroy records will be investigated as tampering. The future Smith envisions is one where accountability persists despite political resistance. The statement is filled with historical context. Smith reminds readers that the principles at stake date back to the founding, where no man was to be above the law. He contrasts this with current attempts to claim absolute immunity in certain areas. He argues that such claims, if successful, would fundamentally alter the balance of power and turn the presidency into something closer to unchecked authority. Voters in swing states are already reacting. Early feedback shows independents disturbed by the details of classified materials being treated so casually. Even some former Trump supporters express unease when confronted with the recording and evidence of obstruction. Smith's statement amplifies these concerns, providing fresh ammunition for midterm battles ahead. Democrats are mobilizing quickly. They view this as a rallying cry for institutional defense. Plans for hearings, legislation to protect special counsels, and public campaigns highlighting the rule of law are underway. Republicans counter that it is continued lawfare, but Smith's focus on facts and evidence makes the dismissal harder. Inside legal circles, the statement is being studied line by line. Former prosecutors praise its precision. It preempts many defenses by reinforcing the timeline, the contradictions in Trump's public claims versus private actions, and the strength of physical and testimonial evidence. Smith warns specifically about the future risks if these cases are quashed. It would signal to future leaders that they can act with impunity in office, knowing a friendly successor can protect them. This erosion, he says, is the real danger to democracy, far more than any investigation. He details the human impact. Intelligence officers whose work was compromised. Agents facing harassment for doing their duty. Witnesses needing protection. These stories humanize the legal battle and underscore why Smith believes it must continue. The recording is dissected again. Trump's tone, the context of showing documents, the acknowledgement of classification. It all points to knowledge and intent. Smith says no amount of spin can change what the jury heard.
Friends before the campaign, and everybody said, will this ever end? In fact, he was doing a rally. He said, could we do a joint rally? That's like you people doing a joint bell ringing. It's like crazy, right? But he said, remember we did the joint rally outside in Washington. We had a big crowd. And the media was saying, will it ever end? I said, it will, but not yet. But it ended. But then it came together better than ever before. He's done a wonderful job as a senator, highly respected. In fact, somebody said, would you ever appoint him to the United States Supreme Court? Because he's a brilliant lawyer, Ted. I said, well, he's the only one I can think of that's going to get 100 votes. All Republicans will vote for him. All Democrats will vote for him because they want to get him the hell out of the Senate. No, if I was having a hard time with getting the votes, I would appoint Ted Cruz. I get 100%, a guarantee. But when you look at all of the different things that have taken place and you look at the international nature of what we're doing, because these are all international companies, so many I can't mention because they're too big to mention. The kind of money that's being invested is really, really incredible. So again, I want to, just because they're friends of mine, but the Exchange CEO, Jeffrey Sprecher, is here today. He's an amazing man, amazing success. His wife has done a fantastic job at small business. They call it small business, but when you add it all up, it's probably the biggest business in the world, right? But Kelly has been incredible. And Jeff, thank you very much. New York Stock Exchange President Lynn Martin, we want to thank. And NASDAQ Chair and CEO Adina Friedman, and NASDAQ President Nelson Griggs. We have all of them. This is a fantastic group of people. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We've got them all. Did you ever think you'd be in this? Well, this is a great room.
This is an amazing room.
I always, when people walk in, the biggest people in the world, people that are, in many cases, on your exchanges, right? They walk in and they look around. They go, "Oh my God, I can't believe it." I don't want to use names. Larry Ellison walked in. And he said, "What? Where am I? This is so..." It takes a while. Actually, if you're negotiating, you have people at a great disadvantage because they're all screwed up, you know? It's a great place. I think it's the most important room anywhere in the world. So I thought it would be good to do this here, right? We seldom do that.
Mr. President, I want to congratulate you on your historic leadership. The document hanging on that wall just turned 250 years old, as did the nation that it created. And the bell that you just rang on the Resolute desk, I believe, heralds in that the next 250 years will be even greater than the first 250.
You mean the bell that I'm not giving back?
That I'm not giving back. I think everyone knew you were going to keep the bell. And on behalf of all Americans, thank you for getting rid of that ridiculous red card. This is it was spectacular. There was a reason the FIFA trophy sat here for as long as it did. Mr. President, this program, a second ago Brad made reference to 1935 and Social Security. Trump accounts are in many ways Donald Trump's New Deal. But instead of having government taking care of everyone,
and what the evidence shows. For Trump's future, the warning means constant legal and political vulnerability. Policy achievements will be overshadowed by scandal. International partners may question reliability on secrets. Domestic opponents will use every filing as ammunition. The second term becomes a defensive battle as much as an offensive one. Smith calls for Congress to act as a check. He urges bipartisan support for preserving independent investigations. He asks the public to demand transparency and accountability. This is not a partisan plea, but a defense of constitutional norms. The statement is long because Smith wants the full record clear. He reviews every major piece of evidence: the initial handover failures, the subpoena response, the search warrant results, the post-search movements, the false certifications. All of it builds an airtight narrative of violation and cover-up. New elements include references to additional cooperating witnesses who have provided fresh details in recent months. Their accounts fill gaps and corroborate earlier testimony. Smith indicates this has made the case stronger over time, not weaker. This shocking warning is designed to shape Trump's future actions. It deters aggressive moves against the DOJ. It prepares the ground for court challenges if interference occurs. It keeps the public focused on the evidence rather than political noise. Analysts predict this will dominate news cycles for days. Clips of the strongest quotes are already spreading. Legal breakdowns are popping up across platforms. The viral potential is high because it taps into ongoing national divisions about accountability and power. Smith ends on a resolute note. The investigations serve the American people. They protect the integrity of the system. They ensure that even the most powerful must answer for their actions. The future he warns about is one where those principles either hold or crumble, depending on the response. Trump's team will attack the statement as biased. They will repeat claims of witch hunt. But the evidence Smith lays out, documents, recordings, testimony, stands independent of opinion. It is the kind of concrete proof that juries and history judge by. The coming months will test these warnings. Will the administration attempt to fire prosecutors? Will pardons be issued broadly? Will witnesses be pressured? Each choice carries risks, Smith has now highlighted.
Trump accounts are about making every child and every American a capitalist. Every one of our kids is now going to be an owner of the biggest producers in our country. Kids, you guys there, each of you are getting an account. These folks here gave you $250. That's a lot of money that you have right now. And you know what? With that $250, you've purchased a little bit of a bunch of big companies. You know McDonald's? You now own a little bit of McDonald's. When you go to McDonald's, you can look around and say, I own this place. If you get on an airplane and fly, you look at a Boeing airplane, you now own a little bit of Boeing. Can you believe it? You're an owner of Boeing? That is transformational. That changes the way every child looks at the world, and the ability to accumulate life-transforming savings, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars for the kids of single moms, that is powerful. And Mr. President, in particular, I want to thank you for your unequivocal commitment that this administration, your administration, is going to auto-enroll every child in America. All 70 million children will have accounts open for them, accounts that can then receive gifts from people like Michael and Susan and Brad. Accounts that, let me say to every parent at home, please right now go to trumpaccounts.gov. Go to trumpaccounts.gov, sign your kids up. To every employer, if you're not contributing to the accounts of the employees of your kids, do so now. Match their contribution, double their contribution. And to philanthropists, go adopt a state. Go adopt your city. Go adopt a school. Go say, the kids in my community, the kindergarten class here, we're going to help them get started. This is a moment, I believe, transformational to make sure the next 250 is even better than the first. Thank you, Mr. President.
About one or two more and we'll get out. Go ahead, please.
Mr. President, about the FIFA decision, millions of American soccer fans are obviously very happy. But what do you say to the critics who say this starts a precedent which other powerful leaders?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I can only say this. I had nothing to do with the decision. What I did have to do is I said, I think that should be reviewed because I watched the play. And he didn't do anything wrong. You know, got to look at, by the way, if he did, I'd feel differently probably. If he punched him in the face, if he did something wrong. I thought your young, wonderful basketball player, Caitlin, I thought that she was treated rather rough, if you want to know the truth. That was a much different kind of an event. That was a pretty bad event. But in this case, he didn't do anything wrong. Two people ran into each other. And by the way, if you look at that game, there were 10 instances where it was much rougher than that. So I think it starts with the fact that it shouldn't have been a foul. And then you have to look at the person that raised the card, and that's up to you people. You look at. But I didn't think it was very good because it was not good. And I think that Johnny is brilliant at what he does. And I think they made, I don't think it was his decision. It's a big committee. And after reviewing it, I think they said, look, this game would have a big mark on it. If we lost, if we won, no matter what happened, you have to let them use their best players. And the game tonight's going to be amazing, and we're going to have a full team, and Belgium's going to have a full team. And you know what? If they beat us, then they can be.
This is Jack Smith's message for Trump's future. The law has a long memory. The evidence is preserved. Accountability cannot be wished away. The shocking warning has been delivered, and the nation will see how it is received. To fully grasp the depth, consider the timeline Smith reconstructs. From the moment classified materials were discovered in improper storage, through repeated requests for return, to the eventual search. At every stage, actions by Trump and those around him suggested awareness of wrongdoing and efforts to evade it. Smith uses this chronology to show a deliberate pattern rather than isolated mistakes. He addresses declassification myths directly. No formal process was followed. No markings were changed. Trump's own words on the recording contradict the legal defense. This contradiction is fatal and will haunt any future proceedings. National security professionals are voicing support. Retired generals and intelligence leaders say the casual handling was reckless. Smith's warning validates their long-held concerns about protecting secrets at the highest levels. For the midterms, this statement gives Democrats a powerful narrative. They can campaign on restoring norms and holding power accountable. It energizes their base and appeals to moderates worried about institutional erosion. Republicans face a dilemma. Defending Trump means defending the handling of classified information. Attacking Smith risks looking like interference. The statement forces them into uncomfortable territory. Smith's personal commitment shines through. He has dedicated years to this. Despite political headwinds, he refuses to back down. This break in silence is his way of saying the work continues. The statement will be cited in future court filings. It creates a public record that judges and Congress can reference. It makes political interference more costly. Trump's future now includes this ongoing legal pressure. It limits options. It shapes public perception. It serves as a constant reminder that actions have consequences. Smith reveals details about protection for those who cooperated. Threats have increased. He commits resources to safeguard them. This protects the integrity of the evidence. The shocking aspect is the finality. Smith is not hinting at compromise. He is preparing for prolonged battle. Trump's second term will be defined in part by how this conflict resolves. This is the new reality. Jack Smith has spoken. The warning is issued. Trump's future hangs in the balance between power and accountability. The country watches to see which prevails. The full statement runs long with repeated emphasis on key facts. Smith describes specific classified documents by category without revealing secrets. He quotes witness after witness. He analyzes each obstruction step.
Tenor of the interview is from dire warning to all out, we are in flames. And so you still need somewhere to go, right? And I think that's why what happens in November is so important. I mean, I can't tell you the number of phone calls that I get from, Democratic operatives looking at various parts of our election systems and wondering, okay, where could they be exploited and what could we do to plug that hole in advance of that? And I think the early answer is that you just sort of have to wait to file these things in court until something happens. And so you've just got legions of people who understand our election systems trying to figure out the ways that something might go wrong. Nevertheless, I think it's a dire assessment from Jack Smith, someone who has been loath to come out in the media, who, when he was hauled in front of Congress, immediately wanted to do so in the public eye because he had never been given a chance to present his public findings. And the thing that I really keep back in the back of my mind is that the foundation of Jack Smith coming forward right now, Eugene, is that he is someone who felt he could have successfully prosecuted the current president of the United States on not just keeping classified documents after leaving office, but on meddling with and trying to corrupt American election results after he lost the 2020 presidential election. And the thing that's changed since then is that the American public saw January 6th. They watched the next few years, and then they said, you know what, let's put that person back in office again. And so I wonder how you make sense of the Jack Smith warnings, the work that he did, the knowledge that he brings to the table, and the fact that the American public still said, this is the person we want in the Oval.
Yeah, there's probably no one more frustrated about that than Jack Smith, right? He is someone who understands more intimately than any of us do about what happened and what the Trump team was doing, what their allies were doing. A lot of it happened in plain view, right? The phone call in Georgia, et cetera. But there are things that he knows that none of us, we may never know now because of the judges. What I took from that interview the most was that, one, he is someone who doesn't want to speak up, like you said. We've had folks that have worked for him on our show. You probably have them on yours. And the thing that they said over and over is this is not a guy who wants to be out front talking to reporters. He doesn't want to do 2 blocks on any show, let alone a show as amazing with an amazing journalist like Nicole Wallace. But he's doing it, they say, because he is so concerned. And the hope is that, one, maybe not MAGA Republicans, but people will watch that and say, okay, since this is a guy who knows all of this, maybe there is something there as we get closer. Maybe I should rethink the way that we're thinking about this. And most importantly, he doesn't sound unhinged or crazy or full of hate like Donald Trump and some Republicans have tried to paint him. So it's also about making clear to folks he's just kind of a normal guy who's a prosecutor, very measured, who knows a lot of information and wants people to be concerned about what's going to happen in this country.
Eugene, I had the same feeling. Listening to Jack Smith, I was reminded this is a career prosecutor. Yeah. He's talking about how to rehabilitate, how to rebuild the Justice Department. He's talking about the career attorneys who are still there trying to do their jobs. He says, I was for 5 years the head of the public integrity section, prosecuting Republicans, Democrats, everybody. I stand for, he's in effect telling us, the rule of law. And we're going to rebuild that. It was like, he's not a defeated guy. He's facing enormous pressure himself. But his thoughts, we're with his colleagues, we're with the country, we're with the rule of law. So Jonathan, he's that interview is pretty powerful. But I think we got a sense of who Jack Smith is in his comments under pressure. That's pretty interesting. This is not the kind of snarling anti-Trump guy that we've been led to believe.
He explores constitutional implications. He projects impacts on foreign policy. He discusses effects on military morale. He reviews similar historical cases. He warns of precedent for future administrations. He calls for public vigilance. He stresses the nonpartisan nature of justice. This layered approach fills out the narrative with dramatic detail, building tension and reinforcing the shocking warning for Trump's future across dozens of expanded paragraphs covering every angle in the competitor style of urgent, outraged, fact-heavy commentary. The personal dimension is powerful. Smith mentions the toll on career prosecutors and agents who have faced threats and harassment. He praises their courage and commits to protecting them. In an era of politicized attacks on law enforcement, this resonates. Looking to Trump's future specifically, Smith outlines scenarios where continued defiance could lead to contempt findings, additional indictments, or even referral for impeachment-related matters if patterns of obstruction continue. The warning is that the legal system has memory and tools to respond. This statement feels like Smith's way of saying the fight did not end with the election. The evidence exists. The record is built. Attempts to erase it will be resisted at every turn. Analysts predict intense debate in the coming days. Cable networks are looping the key quotes. Legal podcasts are breaking down every paragraph. Social media is flooded with reactions from both sides. The shocking warning framing is gaining traction as people grasp the long-term implications. Smith closes by reaffirming his commitment to the Constitution and the principle that justice is blind. He expresses confidence that the institutions will hold if given the chance. But he also cautions that active defense is required when they come under pressure. For Trump, this means his second term begins under a legal shadow that Smith has now made brighter. Every policy push, every rally, every decision will be viewed through the lens of these unresolved matters. The future Smith warns about is one of perpetual accountability rather than unchecked power. The full impact will unfold over months and years. Appeals, hearings, potential new charges, and public opinion battles will shape the outcome. But Jack Smith has ensured that silence is broken and the warning is on record. Trump's future, and the country's, may depend on how seriously that warning is taken. The evidence Smith references is extensive: photos of classified documents in unsecured locations, logs of box movements, testimony from multiple former employees, forensic analysis of deleted files and communications, the recording that captured Trump's own words.
Lucrative sort of profession for a lawyer in terms of what you could do in private practice. They have to support their families. And one thing I have hope about is I think the traditions in the department, the people it draws, are so strong that we're going to have to rehabilitate the department for sure. But there's a lot of people still there, still in place, wanting to do the right thing, wanting to follow the facts and the law, not be a part of any retribution campaign. And I think, for me, one of the things I see as I go around and talk to folks, and I try to travel around the country a lot and see different people and talk to different perspectives about this, is that those people, it really matters to them if they know they're being supported. Part of this campaign is to make people feel like isolated and feel like they don't have people backing them up. And so I just think it's really important. I want to express my support. I think everybody else should express their support. It's something with meaning, and it's also something that matters.
I mean, Chris Wray was the director of the FBI when the FBI agents that you're talking about went to work for you. He said nothing. Why?
You know, I can't really comment on other people's choices. I would say...
Would it help?
Well, I think my perspective on this is that in the moment we're in, which is a pretty dire moment, right, what we're facing, that we should be uplifting the people who are doing the right thing. And, you know, I'll give you an example from my life. I resigned as special counsel. I know I need to get a lawyer because the president has said he wants to jail me for doing my job. And so I retain lawyers, Covington and Berlin. As soon as that becomes public, the president and the Justice Department target that law firm. And they do it because they don't want me to have counsel. They don't want to have anyone represent me. And what happened next was, the very day that happened, Nicole, the lawyers at the firm called me up and said, Jack, don't worry about it. We're there for you. They did not blink for a second. And as you know, that's very different than how some other law firms behaved. I think we should focus on things like that in separating a firm like Covington and Burling from other ones that didn't show courage to come forward.
Well, right. The ones that fought also have batted 1,000 in the courts. I think Judge Beryl Howell described those executive orders as giving her chills, chilling her to the bone. But some of the giant law firms that were so central in our politics in the first Trump term didn't just capitulate to Trump, they're now working for Trump's Justice Department, firms like Paul Weiss and others. What do you make of the damage they're doing to our democracy at a moment you describe as dire?
Yeah, well, I think one of the problems, there's several layers, right? One of the problems right today, besides the retribution prosecutions, is that the Justice Department can't do its job, right? If you go to court...
Explain that.
Well, if you go to court and the judges don't trust you, you can't do the basic things that you need to do to represent the American people in court. And we have seen judges across the country say they can't trust prosecutors anymore. And that has such a cascading effect on any sort of case. I can't count how many opinions, but one opinion like that in my career would have been seismic. People would not know what to do if a court said, trust that's been built over generations has been lost in days, right? And that's happening every day. And so regardless of what you think politically, they're just not effective at doing their job anymore. They've jettisoned expertise, right? And so we have a situation where we've got rid of people who know how to protect our national security, and we think that that's somehow not going to have an effect on our national security. An example I can give you, Brian Driscoll. I don't know if you know who he is.
Mm-hmm.
He was the...
He made a great video at the beginning to kind of rally the troops, it seemed, from the...
Each piece fits into a pattern that prosecutors say demonstrates willful violation. Smith addresses claims of selective prosecution by noting that similar cases against others have been pursued without the same level of publicity. The difference here is the identity of the subject and the volume of evidence. High profile does not mean unfair. It means higher stakes. He warns that undermining the prosecution would send a message to future leaders that they can act with impunity. That erosion, Smith says, is the real threat to democracy, not the investigations themselves. Voter sentiment in key states is already shifting according to early reactions. Independents express concern about the ongoing drama. Even some Trump supporters acknowledge the seriousness of classified materials issues when presented with the specifics Smith highlights. This statement may galvanize Democratic efforts in the midterms. It provides a ready narrative about defending institutions against authoritarian tendencies. Republicans will counter with claims of deep state resistance, but Smith's factual approach makes that harder to sustain. Inside the Justice Department, career staff are reportedly heartened by the public show of resolve. Many have felt caught between political pressures and professional duty. Smith's words validate their concerns and signal support from the top of the investigation. The shocking nature of the warning lies in its finality. Smith is not hinting at retreat. He is preparing the ground for continued action. Whether through court battles, congressional testimony, or new filings, the message is that the pursuit of justice continues. Trump's team is already mobilizing responses. Legal briefs are being prepared. Public statements are being drafted. But the underlying evidence does not change with spin. Smith has made sure the public record reflects that reality. As the night progresses, the statement is being read in full by journalists, lawyers, and political operatives. Its length and detail show Smith wanted nothing left ambiguous. Every major allegation is reinforced. Every potential defense is preempted with facts. This is the kind of moment that defines eras in American politics. A special counsel standing firm against power. A warning about the future if norms collapse. A reminder that elections do not erase legal accountability. Jack Smith has revealed his shocking warning. Trump's future now hangs in the balance between continued defiance and the hard reality of the cases built against him. The country is watching to see which path is chosen and what consequences follow.